Hello everybody, this is International Master Jesse Kraai, and today I'd like to talk about how Vladimir Kramnik recently came back to his old favorite one knight f3. Vladimir's had a lot of trouble in the last couple of years in terms of his game. There's been maybe psychological difficulties, maybe some health difficulties, and I don't really understand any of that stuff, but what I think a part of that was that Vladimir tried to switch from one knight f3 to e4. And I think a large part of that decision had to do with the notion that he felt that white needed to play more aggressively, like a move like 1e4, in order to fight for an advantage. Now, however true that might be in a theoretical sense, I think e4 didn't fit Vladimir's style. And I'll just say from my own personal experience, when Kramnik, who's kind of a hero of mine, switched to e4, I also switched to e4. And it was a horrible mistake leading to an incredible spiritual malaise. And the basic point is that unless you're a really aggressive attacking player, you probably shouldn't play e4. And if you play more based on the models of guys like Smyslov and Karpov, you shouldn't be playing e4. You should play knight f3. Or some kind of slower variation. And the point is, and I think Vladimir is hopefully understanding this, at least I'm coming to understand this, is that it's not so much, the opening isn't so much about getting some kind of theoretical advantage. I think it's more about getting a position you feel more comfortable with. Okay, so in today's matchup we have round 3 of the Olympiad, where he's facing Arkadi Naiditsch. And this was kind of a revenge match because Vladimir had a clearly winning position against Naiditsch in the last Dortmund, and Naiditsch drew that game. Naiditsch was white in that game, but Vladimir clearly should have won. And Naiditsch went on to surprisingly win that tournament. So let's see what happens. So Arkadi played knight f6, and we get c4, c5. Now, back in the day, Vladimir used to play knight c3, and after knight c6, g3, d5, he came up with this move d4, which it's hard to say how dangerous this is really for black in a theoretical sense, but he understood the positions very well and ended up scoring a very great number of beautiful victories against very strong opponents. Now, in this game, he plays a somewhat similar idea, but with a different move order. He plays g3, and after Arkadi played d5, now he d4. And we get this kind of funny position where white has this only extra pawn move with g3. And on the surface, it would seem like black should be able to equalize easily. But it's really not so easy. We'll see this in the game. Black has many different possible moves here. And Arkadi played pawn takes pawn. And here we see Kramnik's idea, bishop g2. And this idea, as far as I know, really was only played in a rapid game with Topolov and Shirov many years ago, and it's never really been played on a high level at this longer time control. And the kind of funny thing about this is that obviously we're not taking the pawn back, and there's a lot of questions. So first of all, one question would be, what happens if we take the pawn? And that's just going to be a mistake because black can play immediately e5, knight f3, d4, and black's beautiful because knight takes pawn is not possible due to queen a5. Okay, so let's back up. So therefore we get this funny idea of bishop g2, waiting to take the pawn on d4. Now, the funny thing about this position is that really we have to ask ourselves, well, what if black just takes this pawn? And this, I think, is probably the critical variation. I've looked at this a little bit, and I think white might be able to hold a small advantage by playing now queen takes d4. The point is, after, say, queen takes, knight takes, it'll be very hard for black to hold on to that c4 pawn. And the question will be really, well, is white going to be able to maintain an advantage, really? He'll be able to win the pawn back. But the kind of question is whether black is just simply going to be equal after all this. And I hopefully that'll be a variation that we'll probably see in the future if this opening experiment of Kramnik gets played again. And I'm hoping it does, and I'm hoping he does return to knight f3 on a consistent basis. Okay, one funny thing about this position after d takes c4 I'd like to share with you guys. Let's look at a totally different position, or a seemingly different position. This would be a QGA or a Catalan. This could arise many different ways. And here we have the same position. Kind of a funny transposition in a very unexpected way where we get the same position. Okay, let's go back to the game.